Okay, so hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ashari. My channel is Ashareeunique, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about this movement right here. So when it comes to this movement, a lot of people don't actually know that it's a movement. Crazy, right? So the reason I'm talking about this movement is because a lot of people have made it into an aesthetic, which I don't want to say it's any individual's fault, but I think it's actively harmful to still portray this movement as an aesthetic when you could easily call this the art mom aesthetic or something like that. I'm just not going to call this an aesthetic at all because it did not start out that way, and it's a movement. It's super disrespectful. I can get if you don't know, because a lot of people don't. It's literally been diminished. Like, I don't see a lot of people talking about this, but one person that I did see talk about this specifically was this YouTuber named Kaylee. She has 17 subscribers right now, which is absurd because she did a video about this topic and she did her thing. Okay, when I tell you that she did her thing, she really went in. She had articles, she had facts, she had sources. She was really talking about it because this is a movement. This is not an aesthetic. I repeat, this is not an aesthetic. She did a really great in-depth video about the movement and how it was on certain social media platforms. If you looked up the movement, you would actually see it barely any people of color when that was the whole point of the movement. Random cut in, but there are important links down in my description, so please click them to help some people out. Please boost them, please repost them, or donate if you can. So let me actually say what the movement is about. So right now I'm going to be reading the same source that Kaylee had in her video when she was talking about it and she was reading off of it. So I'm just going to be reading a little bit so you can understand what this movement is about. So it says, with trailblazers Amanda Stenberg and Willow Smith already vocal supporters, we discover more about the art movement that's shattering cultural stereotypes. So the movement was basically started for Black people, and it had Black people in mind to combat stereotypes so people could see us in a different light and see us in the light that we wanted to show ourselves in. At the time when this article was posted, it was 2015, so there are a lot of differences now. But they said that the hashtag was used for selfies with an artsy twist to them, usually with scribbles or Van Gogh paintings in the background, something typically artsy, and they were meant to show Black people and people of color in a creative light. Movements like this are important because there are so many stereotypes amongst Black people and people of color. With Black women specifically, we get called negative, aggressive, angry, strong. We can survive anything because they call us strong, and then decide to be mean. Okay, so one thing that I want to talk about is originally this movement was made for Black women to combat stereotypes, and it's really for everybody. But the thing is, now the movement it's still alive, but a lot of people have completely diminished and set aside the movement's purpose to simply call it an aesthetic and be artsy. So the problem that I have with people saying, oh my gosh, they're an art, is that people use the movement's term, a movement for people of color, to be confident in their artsy selves, to label their aesthetic. Okay, so in 2021, when you look up the movement's name, even if you put art and then put the movement there, aesthetics. So the audio messed up there, but when you look up the term, you don't see the movement, you just see non-people of color showing off their aesthetic or what they think is an aesthetic. And the problem with that is that people are completely erasing a movement by calling it an aesthetic, and it's just like,
Please bring attention to the movement after you learn, and call what you're wearing the art mom aesthetic or something.
Black people created a movement for people of color to simply be their artsy selves after they've been called ghetto, loud, ratchet for simply just existing. And now once they created a movement for themselves, people decided to take that movement and brand it as their aesthetic. Ain't that something? So we've quickly seen, okay, so I just want to tell you some of my personal stories with this movement. So when I first seen it, I've actually seen a lot of people. So as I'm looking, I'm seeing people, there's this recent video, I don't want to call anybody out, this isn't a call out video, but I've seen this video where it says they're dressing as aesthetics, and one of them says art, and it's like, it's 2021 at this point. I'm not even gonna blame people for using the title, but I feel like the proper thing that should be done is that, hey, if you have a platform and you've publicly used your platform to say, here's this aesthetic, and then after you found out that it wasn't an aesthetic, simply say, hey, this is the movement, this is what it is, here are people of color who have talked about it, and yeah. I've seen videos as recent as 2 months ago talking about this movement in terms of an aesthetic way. Anyways, those videos talking about art as an aesthetic are getting views. So hopefully Kaylee's video talking about it and other people actually, I haven't seen any other person talk about it except for Kaylee, who's an individual channel. I've seen a channel that I think a company owns talk about it, but their company, but that video is also really good, link down below. So yeah, but I hope videos like mine and others talking about the actual movement get traction and get views, because it's a movement. It was not an aesthetic. This was culture, you know, and the way that it was just stripped down to simply aesthetic was so crazy. It was like, no, what you're not gonna do is act like black girls haven't been getting called loud and ghetto, and how other people of color haven't had negative stereotypes thrown at them for years, and then when they try to say, hey, we're not these stereotypes, we're just us, and hey, this is a movement made for us specifically because we have to deal with these problems, y'all aren't about to say this wasn't a movement, this is an aesthetic. No. And that comes to black people too. This is not an aesthetic. But I feel like everybody that made a video calling this an aesthetic, the least you can do is just make a separate video about this, clearing it up, saying, hey, it's not an aesthetic, guys. It was a movement. You know, please support these people. They started the movement. The Art Collective is right here, you know, doing their thing, being them. Quirky black girls exist. And yeah, like it could all be that simple. It could all be that simple. Like, you know how refreshing it was to see black girls with puffs behind Van Gogh pictures? Starry Night with the fro? I love the sound of that. I truly do. Like, you know, hold up, let me pose for it. Like, that's so cool. But for a movement to be simply chopped down to a simple aesthetic, come on now. And just know I'm not shaming people for not knowing that this was a movement. I completely understand, because at first when I seen it, the only thing that came up was how to be an art instead of it's actually a movement. You know, that was the only thing that I myself seen at first. But you dig a little deeper and it's a movement. So if you know the information now, you know, don't just say aesthetic. You know, if you know the information now, just say, hey, it's a movement. It was started for an important reason. These negative stereotypes affect people of color, and here's ways that people of color have been combating them. They simply just been themselves. The movement was so important because a lot of people of color haven't seen themselves in social media specifically, in media in general, but when we have, it's often been stereotypes. And with this movement, it was just us being us, and that could be in any way. Of course, it was like an alternative way, because that's what the stereotypes will say, being artsy is alternative. It's like, no, it's not. It's just us. But you know, Black people and people of color were just like, hey, we're ourselves. We're artsy. We can like books. I like Starry Night. And that's where the video would end because my camera ran out of space. But I have more to say, so it's not ending now. I just think that it's so crazy how most of us didn't know that this was a movement. Me personally, because I was on social media looking for, you know, aesthetics and this type of style. Even though I already had my own, I thought it was just fun to see other people's or see the videos and watch the videos of how to become a baddie or the baddie aesthetic, how to get the baddie aesthetic, how to get the plant mom aesthetic, you know, different aesthetics. And I came across the one that was titled as the same title as this movement, and that was honestly crazy, but a lot of us didn't know, and now we do know. And hopefully more people will watch this video and they'll know, do more research on it, and watch the videos that were mentioned. But movements like these were important specifically because people of color didn't have the accurate representation. And then once we see ourselves, portraying ourselves, we had creativity and control of our own image. And it was in a positive light.